Good morning, Jody.
Good morning, Amanda. Good morning, everybody.
Yes, or good afternoon, everybody, if it's
Yes,
afternoon.
or good afternoon or evening. Depends on where
Yes.
you're tuning in from.
Absolutely. So I'm Amanda Tosoff.
And I'm Jody Prosnick, and we are 2/3 of the Music Education Hub Music Arts Collective. The other 1/3 is our Executive Director, Francesca Fung. She's managing the chat. So make sure you say hello to Fran and let us know where you're tuning in from right now for this live stream.
Yes. So we're so excited. This is number 11 of our live stream series we've been doing since September. And we've had some pretty amazing special guests, Celine Peterson, Emily Claire Barlow, Lila Bialy, Heather Bambrick, Sharanth Bedigay, my childhood hero, Rini Rosnes last week. And we're so excited to bring you some special guests today. But if you're interested in checking out those past live streams, definitely go to our YouTube channel and subscribe, and or visit our website where you can get all the links, and also check out what workshops we have on the go. As well as our freebie, which kind of ties into today. So we have a freebie of the month, and Jody and I got a little excited about transcribing some of our special guests from our recent recordings, and we ended up putting them on our website for all of you keen people who want to go check them out and learn them. And one of the special guests is the wonderful Kelly Jefferson, who is here today, and the other one is Jody's wonderful husband and pianist, Tilden Webb, from her beautiful record Sun Songs. So please go check that out. And yeah, they're amazing solos.
And the cool thing about the two solos is that Kelly and Tilden were actually roommates in university. So it's like their transcriptions are roommates.
That's amazing.
It's poetry.
Amazing.
So speaking of more amazing jazz musicians, composers, and educators, we can't say how excited we are so excited about today to have the amazing Allison Au and Kelly Jefferson on for our live stream to celebrate all things transcribing. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about both Kelly and Allison. So Kelly has won multiple JUNO awards. He's a composer and an educator, and he has been a leading figure in our community for the past 25 years. Performed with the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, Maria Schneider, Christian McBride, Kenny Werner, Phil Woods, Clark Terry, Al Jarreau, Michelle Legrand, Brian Blade, Russell Malone, I mean, you name it. He is one of the top call musicians in all of Canada, probably one in all of North America. He holds a bachelor from McGill University and a master's from the Manhattan School of Music. He's toured all over the world, including a tour with Maynard Ferguson Band. He has his own group. The Kelly Jefferson Quartet was nominated for a 2011 JUNO-award. And his recent project is called Toontown with Artie Roth on bass and drummer Ernesto Cervini. He's on faculty at University of Toronto and York, and is such an awesome educator and such an open, awesome heart that he's invited to do clinics and workshops all over North America. I know both Amanda and I love playing with Kelly. We love working with him. And I would say that he is one of the most beloved members. Both of these musicians are two of the most beloved members of the music community in Canada. So yes, so many other, so you can go and check out his website for more information about him. And now let's chat a little bit about Allison, who also has an amazing resume as well. She's a JUNO award-winning saxophone player, composer, and arranger. She was born to a Chinese father and a Jewish mother and raised in the multicultural metropolis of Toronto, and she was found music as a young child and was influenced and impacted by a wide range of styles. So her music, which you should definitely go check out, her compositions are stunning pieces of art. Kind of transport you to a place where instrumentals ring bold and emotions run free. It's very beautiful and emotive music. There's a lot of color and character, and you can really, she's very careful at how she writes and arranges for all the different members of her band. Her first JUNO nomination was for her debut album, and then she won in 2016 Best Jazz Album of the Year group with Forest Grove, which is where I first got to know her. I bought the album right away and it's been on heavy rotation in my house for a long time. She has toured all over the world, won numerous awards, and had 3 consecutive artist residencies at the Banff Center, the 2017 Grand Prix de Jazz at the Montreal Jazz Festival, the rising star of the Halifax Jazz Festival, and in 2017 was the finalist for the Toronto Art Foundation Emerging Jazz Artist Award. Now, the interesting thing is when we read these bios, I'm sure they're backstage just going, oh my gosh, it's a little overwhelming to hear all this awesomeness, but just to let you know, these are 2 remarkable people, and we're so excited to have them on our live stream today. Yay!
Absolutely. And yeah, they're both of these musicians, their playing is just, it's transcribe worthy. Absolutely. It's so melodic and unique and inventive and just beautiful. So I'm really excited to talk to them today. Maybe before we bring them on stage, maybe we can just define what transcription is, just for anyone who's maybe not a musician or is just curious what that really means. And essentially, it's when you learn a solo, when you take something from a recording, and it could be a solo, it could be a melody, it could be a harmony, a rhythm, and you learn it by ear. And, as the term implies, that you can write it down, although a lot of musicians might just memorize it. So that's transcription in a nutshell. And, often my students will say, well, why do we need to transcribe? Well, I tell them it's like learning a language. If you want to get the accent right, if you want to be able to communicate, you have to learn the language. You have to learn the melodies and the traditions and the way that things are articulated. And we're going to talk a bunch more about this with Kelly and Allison today and find out more about their music. So let's welcome them onto the stage. Here we go. Kelly and Allison.
Yay!
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, yay. So well, first of all, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to be on our live stream today. I'm sure that all of our listeners are going to gain a whole bunch of insight and information from speaking with you two. But before we get started into diving into transcribing and what all that means and what we can do with that, I just want to hear a little bit about your musical background. So here's the big question. What is your musical background? So when did you get started and how did you discover jazz? What was the moment and decide that, ooh, this was the path that I wanted to take? So maybe we'll start with Kelly.
Okay. Wow. Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's just a huge honor to be here. So I am originally from Regina, Saskatchewan, born and raised, and I grew up in a musical household. And I'll probably be talking a little bit more about that later because it's turned out to be a really sort of a pivotal part of my learning process, I think. And I'm not sure if I chose to this rather than it chose me. I was involved in a lot of great musical experiences growing up. There was a great band program in Regina sponsored by the Lions Clubs called the Regina Lions Band. And I was in it for about 8 years from the time I was 10 years old until I graduated high school. And I learned to read music and learned about playing music in that band. It really created a really great foundation for me. And it was in that band that I started on the alto saxophone, switched to tenor a couple of years in, and mostly because they needed tenor saxophones for the jazz ensemble. So that was my first exposure to playing jazz. And again, my dad had a lot of great records at home. I went and took out some records from the Regina Public Library. And that was my first exposure to jazz, really. Really, in my graduating year of high school, I didn't really think too much about what I wanted to do afterwards. It just felt like kind of a natural progression. I thought, okay, well, I'd like to learn more about music. So I guess I'll try that. I was fortunate enough to get into McGill, and that's really, really for me, that's where the learning started, like in a very serious way. I was I was instantly part of just an amazing community, fantastic teachers. And that's when I really kind of started putting things together, I think. And yeah, again, just an amazing experience being there. And I'm happy to say that I'm still in touch with a lot of my former classmates from those days. And so that was a really important time for me. And I'm sure as I talk about my transcribing process, you'll get a little bit of a deeper window into what all that means for me. And how it's influenced what I do presently, which is I'm still involved in post-secondary education. I'm teaching part-time, as you mentioned, at both York University and University of Toronto. And I love doing that. And it's definitely a big part of who I am. But I've really come at all this from a playing perspective right from the beginning. And for me, I mean, we're talking about transcribing, which in some way deals with the ear training term, I suppose, if you want to call it ear training. And really, I think I had, I had a pretty good ear when I was young, but I didn't really know what anything was. I didn't study music theory really until I got to university. So that was very daunting for me at the beginning of university. Mm-hmm. I definitely felt like I was in over my head, and I didn't really belong there. And fortunately for me, because of the great community there, I was sort of able to put labels to things that I heard. And after that, things started to snowball for me. But really, listening has been at the heart of how I process music right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And it really wasn't until later that I realized, just trying to, a lot of today is going to involve some explanations. And I feel like that is also, an art unto itself, is being able to explain these things that can sometimes not really be explained fully. And, we can sort of talk about that with how transcriptions may or may not be notated correctly, because, a lot of this has been improvised and, but really through all of those different processes, like I've transcribed in different ways throughout my life, and I continue to do that. And it's always different. And I think there is really the learning process. It's not, there's just so many ways to come at this. And really, I just see music as this huge, enormous thing that we can spend the rest of our lives just trying to tap into and get as much as we can. And we're never going to scratch the surface. So I've sort of had to make peace with that side of it and take a bit of the pressure off myself of feeling like I'm in these positions of, knowing more than other people, which isn't really it. It's, I'm still trying to come at this in, just a very honest way. And now I have the luxury in a lot of ways of going back to my, some of the first recordings that I was drawn to, and now I hear completely different things in them, and for me, if that's not the real reason why we need to just be checking this music out on all of these different levels, I don't know what is, because there's just so much in there to investigate and to make part of our own sort of musical worlds,
Amazing.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there. A lot of standout things, but I'm gonna pass the baton to Allison, and maybe you can chat about your background and finding jazz and where we are today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say thank you guys as well for having me, and also to be sharing this platform with Kelly today, because I've spent many years studying with Kelly, and Kelly was just like, or it still continues to be, such a huge inspiration and role model to me. So I'm really honored to be alongside Kelly today. So thank you for having me. My journey in music was like perhaps a little more circuitous in some way. I started with piano at the age of 6, and I was kind of following in the footsteps of my older brother and sister. My parents just kind of encouraged all of us to take piano lessons because it was a thing to do. Neither of my parents are musicians, but or have careers in the arts, but have always been really passionate supporters of the arts. And really kind of translated that to us as kids when I was little. I remember there were always a lot of books at home, and there still are at my parents' place. My dad had a really wonderful vinyl collection that he still has. And I think early on, I loved pulling records off the shelf and CDs and just exploring like album artwork and wanting to know where all these sounds were coming from. And music was always playing. I remember music was always in the background at birthday parties and social gatherings and whenever family friends would come over for dinner and stuff. So it was always around. And I guess the piano lessons kind of started. And then I think a pivotal moment for me was enrolling in an art school. And in Toronto, there's a great art school called Claude Watson School for the Arts. It's in North York, or the north part of the city. And I was really fortunate to attend that program. And I think that was really monumental. Because that's where I saw a female playing the saxophone, and that was my band teacher from grade 6 to grade 8. And her name is Mrs. Thompson, and I believe she's retired now, but still is active. Yeah, Kelly, you probably know her.
Yes. Hi, Maggie.
Yeah, Maggie Thompson.
If you're there.
Yeah,
She's
and
awesome.
she's absolutely awesome. And I think as, I was probably 9 when I first saw her when I started, because the program starts in grade 4, but I didn't start band until grade 6, so around the age of 11 or 12. But she was a band teacher, and she had so much energy and was so excited, like genuinely excited about leading the class. And I think that was just a huge moment for me to see a woman in that position, and it really inspired me to want to learn the saxophone. And she just made it look so much fun. So I completed that program. And then in high school, I wasn't really sure if I would pursue music. I think I continued to take private lessons, but I kind of followed more of an academic route. And then when it came time to apply for college, I still wasn't sure if I would pursue, a career in music. But I knew there was so much that I didn't understand. And so I auditioned for Humber College, and I was accepted, fortunately. And even when I started the program, I still wasn't sure. I kind of was just approaching the whole program with kind of from a perspective that I just wanted to learn more about the instrument and how the mechanics of theory and chord progressions worked, and didn't really decide. I was just kind of maintaining an open mind and trying to meet people. But I met so many incredible peers and mentors that I was inspired to continue and complete the program. And I guess the rest is history kind of from there.
Amazing.
I love hearing about your guys' background, because I've known you for many years, but I don't know if I've ever had these stories. This is so great. So I think let's continue thinking back to first starting out with jazz, and I'm curious about what the first solo was that blew your mind, or what was the first solo or excerpt of the solo that you guys checked out. Maybe we'll go back to Kelly with this one.
Okay.
First.
So some of the early things that happened for me, because like I said, I was primarily an ear player all the way through high school. And when I did start checking out jazz records, and specifically saxophone records, and I guess, I should also say that I was drawn to the saxophone first, and the music kind of later. Like as soon as I started hearing people play the saxophone and realizing what could be done on the instrument, that's what brought me towards jazz music, I think. So it was really not instrument specific, but instrument related, if that makes sense. And that's the whole spot where it started for me. There's just how much really was out there. So the two records I remember taking out from the Regina Public Library were a Dexter Gordon record, one of the live from Copenhagen, and John Coltrane live at the Village Vanguard, I think. And I mean, as a kid, like, I was just thinking, oh, I like the sound of this, and it wasn't really like I wasn't really as focused on the content. And then I heard these records, and those two specifically, and it was like, 747, just like right over top. What is going on? What is this? Like, I know I can hear a saxophone in there, but you know, quite honestly, it was almost like it was too much in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And actually that's sort of what happened is those were the first recordings, but I didn't, you know, I listened to them and then I kind of went in different directions. And, you know, when I was seriously studying, you know, at McGill, I really got into those records and back into them. And it just, they, you know, I have a special spot for at least those two records, you know, because of that. But, and I also remember, you know, I think the first saxophone playing that I ever copied was the saxophone solo off of Money by Pink Floyd.
Yay. It's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's
is
iconic.
good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I love that. Just saying that the entry points for people, it's whatever you are exposed to, and that there's nothing wrong with that. You know, like we can, like very few people start with a Love Supreme. You know,
Yeah.
So I mean,
Well,
Careless Whisper probably got a lot of people on the saxophone. Let's just
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
You know, like I wish I could sit here and say, you know, I was drawn to the sound of the, you know, it struck my heart and soul to its core the moment I heard it. Really, I thought the saxophone looked really cool, so I wanted to learn how to play it. Like that's honestly, I you know, I'm not. That's how. I mean, so I got way more out of the deal than I ever bargained for because you know, so it's kind of all been uphill from there.
I love that.
Oh my gosh. All right, Allison.
Ooh. Yeah, no, that's great to hear Kelly's side of things and how he got into it. For me, the first solo would have been Ella Fitzgerald's scatting on Mac the Knife on the Live in Berlin record. And that just happened to be, and you know what, I don't even think I had the original album, or my dad didn't have the original record. It was on a compilation, I think a vocal jazz compilation that he had at home when I was little. And he must have played it. And then I realized at a certain point, I was putting it in the CD player. And I remember putting it, and I listened to it over and over and over again. Yeah, and I don't think I did that with that many pieces of music at that age. I think I was 6 at the time. And that solo just really captivated me. There was a freedom that she had, and then she very famously forgets the words, and then she imitates Louis Armstrong and was able to kind of vocalize all these instrument sounds. And I had never heard anything like that, I think, before then. So it really captivated my, like that childhood interest, I think. And I realized that was kind of the sound of jazz that I think I really ended up gravitating towards, that kind of X factor, or that aura that I couldn't figure out what it was. And even to this day, I think oftentimes with transcribing solos, it's not always the content, but it's like the vibe or the energy that you hear. And it may not necessarily even be from the soloist, but from the rhythm section, or a line that somebody else played in the comping pattern, and then the soloist feeds off that. And it's just the way those elements coincide is so, there's just like, yeah, that energy that you can't capture, but you want to be in it. So you transcribe it to kind of emulate and live in that energy. So that was probably the first solo that I heard. And then I think later, I mean, transcribing as a process was very new to me. And I really wasn't introduced to it rather until college. And then I think probably for a master class was the first transcription I did. And it was Paul Desmond. I think it was a solo Alone Together on the album Feeling Blue. That was the first solo I remember transcribing. Yeah, so.
Those are good ones. You know what's striking me about that, Allison? I relate to the humor, the joy, the like. Sonny Rollins used to. When I was a young player, appealed to me too, because there was like humor in it. There was like, you know, this joy and this like kind of like not taking yourself seriously all the time. And Ella has that too, you know, that like we're actually really enjoying this. And then there's stuff that has more gravity to it for sure. But then there's the levity part as well. And I know for me that I really resonated with what you said there with the Ella Solo. And also, Kelly, it really resonates about those really amazing, iconic albums that you may get introduced to early on, and you're like, whoa, I don't even know what to do with this. It's like, but they plant some seeds that then when you start to get a little more schema around the music, you can revisit. So this relationship is so ongoing with all of this. It's like it never ends, and it's just full of delight and discovery for years and years and years. It's so cool. That's why we love this music so much. So rich, so rich. Yeah.
Totally.
Awesome. Oh, is it my turn? It is my turn. Okay, so segue. All right. So here you both teach. So Allison, you must teach as well. Do you teach?
I do. I do a lot of private teaching. Yeah.
Perfect. Good to know. So everyone, both Kelly and Allison teach, just so you know. So what solos do you go to and suggest for your beginners, and why? And so maybe there are some examples of solos that you've heard that would be really great to transcribe, because that's a question I get a lot. Like, where do I start? I know it's like putting Chopin in C flat major in front of a beginner piano student. You know, you want to kind of find these entry points. So what are those for you two?
Well, maybe I'll start. I think so. When the pandemic started, I was thinking of things that I would like to do that maybe I wouldn't have otherwise had time to do before, in the before time. So something I kind of started was brushing up on my French, because French is a subject that I took in school and never really got to a place of like true fluency. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll take this opportunity to review some vocabulary and listen to TV shows or whatever I can get my hands on. And I found a great YouTube video of a blogger, and he kind of talks about when you're learning a new language, and maybe you have a certain amount of vocabulary, try to find things to listen to and do lots of listening, but find things where people are speaking slowly. And I guess the gist of it is to be able to really grab onto the content of what is being said, so that you really kind of walk away understanding everything, albeit at a slow pace, but you're getting everything and you really understand. And start with audio examples and things that you can find to just listen and constantly listen to stuff that you completely understand. And that really stayed with me. And so I've kind of taken that kind of perspective into how I approach introducing some of my students to transcription for the first time. So I guess this is a really common one, but Miles Davis is great. And I have used a lot of his solos, and not that he plays slowly, but because he plays clearly and there's lots of space. And I suppose maybe that's the equivalent for a jazz transcription at a beginner level, maybe for someone who's new to it. So I like to tell my students, like, find lines that you can really hear clearly first, and that you could likely sing. And I really encourage singing as well as an entry point. Try to sing the phrase before you can play it. Sing it really well and clearly so that you can even hear it before you approach your instrument, and you could reproduce it. So yeah, so in short, I tend to gravitate towards like Miles Davis. And I love the recordings, the prestige recordings like Walkin', Cookin', Steamin'. There's some great solos on there. And of course, Kind of Blue. And the piano solos are great. So really anything that I feel the student identifies that they can hear clearly. That's kind of what I start with.
Awesome. Kelly, what would you add to that?
Oh, well, I'm not sure if I can add that much to it. I mean, that's, yeah. You know, I think that we were sort of talking about this before, but there's a lot of ways, just, you know, if you're starting out with this, it can be a daunting task for a lot of people. And this is where, you know, I feel like, I mean, Allison, you mentioned it, and you know, it's something that I try to impress on my students, and also I try to remember myself. And it's basically, of course, there's always exceptions to these things, but you know, if you can't sing it, you probably aren't going to be able to play it. You know, and of course, like I said, these are, you know, when you're learning an instrument and you have to eventually practice, and not eventually, but you have to deal with how you learn things, which is what practice is. And it's that you have to listen to yourself. You have to learn how to listen to yourself on all these levels. So definitely singing along. Like, you know, when you mentioned Kind of Blue, I was going to just go, okay, I'll bet you I can sing 3 notes and you will all sing the rest of the solo back to me. If I go, ba da da,
Ba ba da da da.
ba ba da da. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
So there's not every solo is going to be like that, but somewhere in there has to be, I think, a little bit of that in order, like if you want to get that into you, and even before you go and put it to an instrument or whatever. And of course, like in some of the courses that I teach, students are transcribing solos that aren't on their instrument of choice.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where the singing becomes, important. But of course, it can add an extra layer, and maybe, might take them a little bit longer. But at the same time, they're still listening. And it's about really, this music would not exist in the way that it does if it were not for listening. It is a listening art form, period. And there are many ways to do that. I just always say there are levels to all of this. And because it might be more complex, it doesn't necessarily mean that the simpler solos or the clear solos are any less amazing. Even spending time with really advanced students that have checked out way more at their age than I ever did and could play circles around me if I was the same age as them. They go back and listen to someone like Lester Young, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, there's always this thing. There's a difference between simple and easy, and I think it's because we all want more information. Like we want to play more difficult things, more challenging things. And I get that. And of course that's part of it. But at the end of the day, it's music. And you have to find your way in that way. And I think I've seen a lot of students, like I said, that are at a really high level and could play more content than some of those solos, for like Lester Young, for example. But they're all of a sudden these light bulbs go off. It's like, wow. He is saying so much with just a small amount of material, And again, this all kind of factors into, I would say, the learning process for this music too. And it's not what you play, it's not after a certain point. And I'm not saying that you can play whatever you want, but it's how you play what you play. This is the path that I've gone down many different roads and challenged myself in a lot of different ways. And also I've had to learn to give myself freedom in a lot of different ways so that I don't get too caught up with some of the like intricacies and I try to think my way through things when I just want to be playing my way through them. And that's what a lot of transcribing does for me. Is I'm still amazed at the fact that, like if we're talking about improvisation, this was created on the spot, and we're trying to notate things. And of course, it's not going to be picture perfect all the time, but it's just amazing to me that all of these great musicians were able to come up with these incredible ideas and compose on the spot, essentially. And, so yeah, that's, I don't necessarily have a list of like my go-to solos for beginners, because at the same time, I want to make sure that the students are challenging themselves in their own way, and that they're pushing themselves. And it's not about what I want them to do necessarily, but hopefully with the work they put in the process of transcribing or internalizing something or developing their relationship with it, then they're going to come to these conclusions on their own.
I just wanted to add a fun anecdote. When I was studying with Kelly years ago, I remember, I think, Kelly, I must have asked you one of the lessons, like, oh, can you recommend some cool solos I can do? And I was totally, and maybe you picked up on this, I was thinking like, what's a virtuosic solo or some notey solo I could do? And I remember you were just like, oh, how about Johnny Hodges? You're checking out Johnny Hodges? And I was like, no. And you're like, oh, and you recommended, I think it was Duke Ellington.
Yeah, probably Star-Crossed Lovers or Sunny Side of the Street from the Great Paris Concert.
Star-Crossed Lovers. I had never heard that before.
Unbelievable. Like
Yeah.
I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about that solo.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, but that was a really important thing for me because I think at that, at the younger age, like myself, like so many young players, like they want to get to the content, which is great. And I encourage that too. And I want to learn all that stuff too. But there's something about like, intonation, pitch, like timbre matching, for saxophone players, I think that's so crucial. Inflection, like how the articulation, all these other elements that are so crucial, as well as the content of the line. So
sure.
Thank you, Kelly. I remember that very, very clearly.
Well, and I mean, I was that student that we're talking about, like I needed to own every John Coltrane record, and I wanted to put it on the horn, and I didn't really think much past doing that because there was just so much there. Why would I not want to immerse myself in it? Because it deserved it, But I also had to sort through a lot of things after that. It's so I totally get all angles of this, but at the end of the day, it's what you do. I mean, it's like anything, it's what you do with it, which maybe we'll talk about a little later too. The extraction process, as I call it.
Yes.
Oh,
well,
great.
Absolutely. And I think the next question is, you guys have touched upon a couple of these things already, mentioning like what you can learn from a transcription, endless things. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about, with your students, what you point them their attention to, perhaps. What do you focus on with them when they're transcribing, other than learning and just absorbing the music?
Okay. Maybe just to pick up a little bit what I was mentioning before. For maybe one-on-one saxophone lessons, I normally will encourage the student to choose a solo that they want and that they like. And we just start with one, but I don't need to see anything notated. In fact, I don't want to see anything notated. And I want them to play along with the recording. In other words, really repetitive listening. However long it takes as long as it takes. We're fortunate to have tools now that I didn't have when I did the majority of my transcribing. So you can slow down the tempo so you can pick out the notes and really try to internalize it, singing along with it. All the steps that everybody may or may not realize they have until they actually do that part of the work. And then, as Allison mentioned, like learning things about the instrument, technical things about the instrument, and not worrying about whether or not you have the correct number of beats in every bar because you're too caught up in the notation process, but that can come afterwards. Like a lot of my first lifting, I mean, you mentioned Sonny Rollins. I mean, I remember after my first year at McGill, I was trying to transcribe a lot of his trio recording, the Live from the Village Vanguard stuff. And I remember I was trying to do I Can't Get Started, like just the melody, the way that he was doing it. And I tried to write it down and I just gave up because I didn't know how. And so, but then I also had to just listen to try to get inside it as much as possible. And then articulations and, like you're mentioning, just phrasing and where they sit in the pitch. And not to mention, and here's the other big one is, I feel like, I mean, again, it's not what you play, but how you play, but this is where the rhythmic content comes in. So, I'm not saying that it's not necessary to notate something, because I've also done a lot of that, and it's obviously super important, but it's balancing these things out. And then, the other side to it is, if a student is doing a particular transcription, then the next one, and I'll have them do something stylistically opposite, maybe same instrument. I always encourage their instrument first, because I feel like, sorry, this is going on way longer than I thought.
No, it's great.
But, I mean, music school types of things, there's some stigma attached. And one of them is the fact that, like you hear people talk about perfect pitch, for example, and maybe something like transcribing might come easier for people that can recognize things right away, or, photographic memory, or hearing it first time and you got it. But I don't have perfect pitch, but I feel pretty confident in the fact that the amount of time that I spent listening to saxophone players and picking out the notes on the saxophone, I'm able to get close to what the notes are, which I guess is called relative pitch. But it's not, I don't think it's a crutch necessarily. It's something that I've had to develop, and it's certainly not about if it's easier or not. It's how I've been able to relate to the actual notes, and try to internalize them a little bit. But that can sometimes make things, I've probably transcribed more solos and remembered them than I have notated them. But this is the other thing, is it doesn't need to be a whole solo. It can be 8 bars. It can be 4 bars. It can be 2 bars. And I remember years ago talking to the great Mike Murley about transcribing, and specifically Sonny Rollins. And I think he kind of said, this is getting into whether you can hear influences in people's playing and all of that stuff. But we were talking about Sonny, and Mike basically said, I only lifted like a handful of solos, but I really lifted them. And this is where you can put it under the microscope and you can really start to go down the wormhole of how much is there in terms of, the inflection and all of these, technical things, but also stylistic things, and really trying to copy it, and this is where, it's also kind of fun. I just like to do it because I want to play different things on the instrument, just to get my fingers doing something new and different. And anyways, way too long an answer. Sorry.
That was great.
Awesome.
Awesome. Juicy stuff, Kelly. Great. It's great. So just so much I'm resonating with so much you guys are talking about. I'm sure everyone's loving this. It's demystifying the process too a little bit, I think, for people, because I think it can feel I know it was daunting for me when I was okay, time for transcription, and you're listening and you're I don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
I also really resonated with me the going deep. It's rather than snorkeling a bunch, you go scuba dive and do a few, and really try and embody. It's almost like you're role playing, you're trying to get inside the body of the person that's performing this and trying to feel into what it was like to make the sound that they're making on their instrument and then it'll never be the same because it's your body and your instrument, but just to that deep dive into sort of embodying the music. And of course, that's how the music was really passed on, was through everyone who just got the records and obsessively listened to the famous solos that we all know and love. And that's how Train and Charlie Parker learned from Lester Young and Coleman Hawkins. That's just part of the tradition. So and I agree too that the notation, because of the rhythmic stuff, sometimes it's really hard to actually notate. And I don't know if you guys have worked with classical musicians and you're trying to notate things out rhythmically that are so nuanced that it's always an approximation. It's very hard to make it exact because of the egg rolling feeling on a swing tune. It's not, it's not on the grid in the same way. So anyway, so great, you guys. We're going to move a little bit towards less about soloing per se, and transcribing solos, and talk about composition and transcribing for composition, or looking to songs to give you clues, to explore that side of our artistry. So Allison, my goodness, well, you're both amazing composers. It's like the composition and the improvisation are so intertwined, melody chasers, beauty chasers. So you can hashtag beauty chasers, Kelly Jefferson, Allison Au. Okay. Yeah. Transforming the world one beautifully placed note at a time. So Allison, you're an amazing composer. And I'm curious if you're transcribing, if you've ever transcribed from a composer's lens, and if that has impacted your writing at all. So do you look to classic jazz literature or other literature, for form or for progression. And if there are any composers you would send our composing curious folks to as templates for creative work, or places you can go to kind of go, well, how do they map out their songs in different styles? So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been thinking about this. I really think that, well, more and more as I try to continue to write, because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing when I'm writing every single time I write a new piece of music. But what I do feel is consistent is I think composing is transcribing. It's transcribing what you're hearing. So I've really tried to remain true to that in my process, and that oftentimes I sing a lot in the writing process. And so I write what I'm singing. And if I don't know what's supposed to happen next, I try to sing what the next natural thing is. But I'm improvising, essentially. It's just happening at a very slow rate. And then the notation aspect of it just comes like, what did I hear? What sounds genuine to this solo I'm creating, or this improvised line I'm creating? But how do I notate it to make it feel like it's a melody and it feels organic in its flow and everything? So I guess to answer your question, I think composing is transcribing, but it's a personal transcription. And then, I mean, as in terms of templates, like I think there's some great things. I've certainly have been inspired by chordal progressions, and sometimes it's segments of melodies I've heard, but I've heard it in an inverted way, or I heard it mid-phrase and I think, oh, that could be an interesting melody for something else. And then that kind of, I use that as a springboard in some respects. I've drawn personally a lot of inspiration from classical composers like Debussy and Ravel. And even moments of like a 2-chord progression in a classical piece has informed something I've written in improvised context, or has served as a template for improvising. So those are 2 composers that I love and I continuously go back to for inspiration. And then I think some more jazz composers that have really inspired me, and I have tried to transcribe their chord progressions, would be Wayne Shorter is a huge influence in my writing, and Herbie Hancock. Trying to think. Also, Antonio Carlos Jobim has been a huge inspiration. And I think it's really, I mean, so much great use of like diminished chord progressions and resolution, but just the seamlessness of how he writes, and melody that is so lyrical and rich, but doesn't sound complicated. I think when you listen to the music, it sounds very simple, but so sophisticated in a lot of ways. So those are just some examples of composers that I have gone to try to transcribe chordal progressions. Yeah, actually, Jaco Pastorius too is somebody I've come back to. His writing is very word of mouth. It's a great record, and there's so many things that he's done harmonically that I've tried to figure out, and yeah, still remains a good source of inspiration for me.
Amazing. Yay. Lots of great tips there too.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that I think I told you this, Allison, but I definitely have stolen, I've transcribed a little piece of one of your tunes. I'm actually blanking on the title. I'm so sorry, but it's the Offbeats one. We played it actually together, so I guess I didn't actually transcribe it, but I stole it as the basis of one of my tunes. And so there you go.
Great. I love it. I love it.
I've stolen that too from both of you, just so you know, on 3 a.m.
Borrowed it. Anyway,
that's awesome.
So I guess our next question we'll direct to Kelly, and you're also a fantastic composer. I love your pieces, and you know, I've played with you for years and seen so many different sides and styles, and you play everything with such authenticity, and yet you still sound like yourself every time. And so I'm wondering, it's a bit of a big question, but like, how do you do this? Maybe you can speak to how transcription plays a part in finding your own voice, or what you do with what you transcribe.
Yeah, that's huge. Anyway, and thank you for that, for those kind words. It's awesome. Where should I start? You know, like I said, I came at this very early on, very innocently and almost in a naive way, in terms of like listening and how important it is. And then, like I said, when I actually studied ear training and realized that these were called certain things, and there was a labeling thing, and we were talking about transcribing tunes. So obviously, you know, if you're transcribing a single line, then that's one thing, but you need to understand the harmony behind it. And, you know, there are certain elements that I think are important to just be able to recognize in terms of, you know, this is a major seventh chord, and this is what it sounds like. You can think about that in a bunch of different ways. And this is what also one of the most amazing things about teaching for me is having to come up with multiple ways of trying to not explain things, but just to present them in a variety of ways that may be very different from how I came up being exposed to it, you know. And I end up learning quite a bit more, and, you know, and have been doing that for a long time. And that's something I don't take for granted. But I guess I say that first because, and especially with something like transcribing, you know, we put all this work and effort into it and we want something back. It's like, I want to be able to play this somewhere. And unfortunately, you know, I think there's a certain amount of letting go that has to happen. And this is where you have to kind of look inward and sort of realize other things that are kind of happening. And this is, you know, people talk about developing their own voice or having their own style or whatever. And, you know, I've never really put a lot of thought into that, you know, myself. I don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to have my own style, or I'm going to be an artist today, you know. I mean, in some way, I don't really think of myself in that way either. I want to try to, you know, approach music in a very honest way. And sometimes, at least my process, it's all about listening, and it's about realizing that you're part of a larger thing. So if I'm only listening to my contribution, then I'm cutting myself off from really creating something in all of these moments that we have as musicians. Now, having said that, I'm getting to your question here. I think we develop a lot of skill sets, right? So for me, it certainly doesn't mean that I am a master of all of these different styles of music, because that is absolutely not true. The way that I am able to maybe get inside the music and try to hear what the music might require is through listening and through being able to communicate on my instrument. Sometimes that means playing in a section, which is completely notated, which doesn't mean, I mean, that's where I have to listen even more intently in some ways. If I'm trying to, you know, play in tune with a group of musicians and phrase together and play dynamics together and feel like all of these kinds of things, those are all very technical things to be able to do on an instrument. But, you know, that isn't going to happen in a musical way if you're not listening. So it's really the way that I find comfort in different styles of music is through the other musicians. If that makes sense. Like, I mean, obviously I have responsibility to the music, and I need to be able to play what I'm asked to play, whether that's a part, whether that's improvising, whether it's playing someone's original music, which I'm fortunate enough to do. And I, you know, I love taking direction and having the challenge of saying, no, do it like this. This is how I'm hearing it. And I want to try to hear it as closely as they, you know, and those are all things that I love about it. And there's also a freedom with doing that I've discovered. Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's really about the people that I'm able to be in these environments with. And sometimes I have to do some research on a particular style or whatever, but I try to, I mean, I think it's easy we're our own worst critics, and we will get inside our heads just fine. And I always have to remind myself of that, because if I thought too much about a lot of things that I've been able to do, fortunately, and if I'd thought about them enough, I probably would have talked myself out of doing them. And I wouldn't have the experiences that I've had, you know? And so, I guess, you know, just a couple of things. Hopefully this is answering the question. You know, a lot of young musicians, especially, I mean, you know, of course, finding your own voice is incredibly important. And I don't mean this in any disrespectful way, but I find myself saying, don't worry too much about finding your own voice. You already have it. Like we all have what we have.
Yeah.
The important work is actually seeing how much you can do with what you already have, you know? And for me, the process of the finding was just natural because I love so many different kinds of music and I want to learn about them. And I love, you know, collaborating with different musicians and different artists. And that's what's kind of informed whatever it is I might do or might bring to something. I mean, it's not in a vacuum. It's not just me. So, you know, I find myself kind of saying that about, you know, your own voice. I'm, you know, and just maybe a word about composition. Like, I don't really consider myself a composer, and I'm a product of music school, and I learned things about how music works in school. Most of my compositions have kind of started as exercises. And again, it's the people that bring their thing to my music that makes my music sound like something, you know, and it's this collaborative effort. So, but I need to keep my ears open to that, you know, and, I was going to mention one other thing that's slipped my mind, but it's a hard question to answer. I mean, I hope that helps. Like, this is the ultimate multitasking activity. My students know that I say that a lot because it is, you know, whether it's like you have to listen to yourself, you have to listen to what's going on around you, and there's all this stuff that's happening. But, you know, I've had to focus on practice. Like, my own personal practice is when I try to listen to myself, so that when I'm playing with other people, that's the last thing I want to be listening to. And that's, you know, that there's something in there that is going to keep me honest forever. You know, it's not because it's a constant, like, it's just a constant learning experience. And it's also something, like I was saying, you know, we might feel with something like transcribing, that we need to see an end result. And I'm not really sure. I mean, there's a lot of end results, and it's still what we are going to do with it.
Well, I think, I know. So couple of the things that are standing out for me, if I might synthesize a couple of things, is that you are a huge fan of music. And when you're entering a new environment, your first instinct is to just start exploring, you know, things that may help put fertilizer on the art that you're about to create. So just curiosity, wonder, and also this real kind of getting out of the ego consciousness and being really wanting to serve the music in collaboration with the beautiful people that you play with, and be of service to the song. At the same time, all the work you do on your own means that through that, your individual voice will emerge, which is an assimilation of your lived experience, plus the fan in you that loves all these other great musicians that you're standing on the shoulders of. And it's this wonderful collaborative that you know, all this lived experience meets the music at hand, meets the community of people you're creating with. And I think that Kelly, one of the reasons why you're playing everybody's original music all the time, because you are that person. And I know that you've played my stuff, and I know that you're playing. You know, it's the wholeheartedness with which you bring your full self and all of your heart to anyone's music. Like it's such a gift to art and music and Canada, and you know. So I just, it's interesting to hear you speak of that. And I think for young musicians watching, as terms of a model of that kind of musician, that you're of service in a different way. It's not about you. And it's why you're such a pivotal part of the community, or such an integral part of the community, and why everybody loves you so much. If I might cheerlead you on. And I think, you know, Allison and Amanda are the same kind of musicians. It's just generous and, you know, you know, generous, 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 generous.
Well,
You
and
can
so
hear
are
that in the
you.
music.
Yes, I was just
Well,
going to say Jody too.
So
Yeah.
are you, Jody.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, yeah. It's
Yes.
such a-
Yay
yeah,
for
yeah.
us. Anyway.
Yes.
But, you know, there's lots. This is the funnest part about doing this, I think, for Amanda and I, is being able to bring people forward. So people who might not know you guys get a chance to see your spirits behind the music, because I think we can romanticize and almost put people on pedestals.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I think, you know, we love music, and we love hanging out with people making music together. And that, no matter where you're at in the journey, you can, there's an entry point, no matter where you are, to have that feeling in your life. And I think staying in curiosity and wonder. Anyway, I want to move on. I want to move into, we're like at an hour here. I could talk to you. We could talk to you guys for 3 hours, I'm sure. But I'm going to just move towards just stuff that's going on right now with both of you, like any current projects or events or albums or things you're working on or things you're ruminating on. Where are you at? What's happening? Maybe we'll start with Allison.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, of course, the pandemic has been a roller coaster. It's been challenging in a lot of ways for me personally to stay inspired. So that's probably part of the reason why I started the transcription project that I have on YouTube at the moment, was just to give myself something really concrete to work towards. And they're all solos. The ones I've shared thus far are all solos that I've wanted to learn or have learned in the past, and just put it down on paper and recorded myself to share. And that was kind of the impetus for me too, to start it, was to provide material for alto players, although I do have PDFs available for other instruments who want to learn the solos as well. But just coming from an alto player's perspective and learning tenor solos and learning piano solos, and I'm hoping to do some more trumpet solos and share with people. So on YouTube, it's all free. And if people are interested in the PDFs, they can follow the Patreon page I've set up, and I have all the PDFs ready to go and share with people. And then aside from that, I mean, the summer is looking pretty quiet on my end personally. I'm hoping that, you know, things might open up a bit to be able to perform again. But at the moment, it's pretty quiet. So I'm just trying to do some writing here and there, and just try to stay inspired. You know, read books, watch movie, things that like really kind of spark my interest right now.
I was just going to add that I think Francesca is putting your links to Ali Plays
wonderful.
Alto is the name of the YouTube channel, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you
your Patreon
so much.
as well. So
Thank you.
yeah.
How about you, Kelly? What's happening?
Well, I guess the most recent, or the next upcoming thing is you mentioned the band Toontown that I'm part of with my dear friends and awesome musicians, Artie Roth on bass and Ernesto Cervini on drums. It's a cordless trio. We have one album out, and our new recording is being released on March the 19th. It's called Entering Utopia, and we've done some sort of concert video footage, and we're releasing a couple of the tunes that way. Some from our previous album and some of the newer things from this album. So that's coming up recently, or coming out recently, I should say. And really, you know, I'm still, I mean, teaching has been keeping me happily occupied, you know, since the fall. And so I don't have a whole lot on the go after the school year is done. But I'm certainly looking forward to that time, as I always do, because that kind of feels like I have a little bit more time to myself, and I'm not you know, there's some things kind of trickling in terms of playing, but everything is still sort of on hold. So, but at the end of the year, there's something I'm keeping my fingers crossed for, where I'm not sure if I can mention this or not, but I'm going to anyways. There's hopefully, I'll be fortunate enough to be part of a new recording by the great Neil Swainson, who's putting a quintet together.
That's great.
More
wow.
Neil Swainson.
So yeah, and so, you know, again, like I said, so much is sort of on hold and up in the air, but I'm hoping that this was already supposed to happen, so this is sort of the next running start.
Awesome.
Hopefully it'll take flight or catch fire or whatever. But Yeah, so I'm really hoping that happens. I mean, I'm just a huge fan of Neil and everybody else involved with the project, who I'm not going to say, is like, that it would be somewhat of a dream project in some ways. So
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yes. Well, I wonder, do we have time to do a quick take 5 round?
I think we'll keep it really short. So these are basically 1 word to 1 sentence answers.
Yeah.
This is like fun slam round. So
maybe we can even like go back and forth, perhaps.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
So how about Allison? I'll start with you first. So if you weren't a musician, what would you be interested in doing?
Cooking.
Nice. All right. I'll do the next one for Kelly. Ready? Kelly, what's your favorite venue to play in the whole world? Your favorite venue you've ever played in? Have I stumped you? You can commit. It's okay. Just do your favorite venue today.
Okay, so for nostalgia purposes, I'll have to say the Rex Hotel because because of what it means, I mean, at least those in the Toronto area, and just how important it was and how much it's missed, So I'd have to say the Rex, but I mean, that's too hard to answer.
Okay, you get 2. So is there a second one, like more of a different venue? You say the Rex. That's fine. Okay. Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay, so Allison, who are 3 people who lit your musical spark in your formative years?
Oh, okay. My father, because he was the first person who showed me that when you put music on, you listen. And he demonstrated that. Like, I saw that by example. Like, it was an event, to listen to music. And it just, his record collection and enthusiasm towards music, when I was little, was so inspirational to me and had a huge impact. Then I would say Mrs. Thompson, shout out to Mrs. Thompson, Maggie Thompson, my band teacher, the first female that I saw playing the instrument that I turned to love. And I would say the last person, you know what? It's maybe a tie between like Ella Fitzgerald and Nat King Cole, because those were the first musicians that I heard at home and made music sound so cool. So I think, yeah. So
Amazing.
4 people.
All right, Kelly. You're hosting a dinner of 4 people. Who are those dream guests, and what are you going to make for them?
Okay. Slightly different spin. I'm gonna say if it can be anyone, I'm gonna say my grandparents, both my mom's parents and my dad's parents.
Wow.
And sort of being able to act, like be me as I am right now, like as old as I am, and ask them questions. Get some dirt on my folks, for example, like things that I kind of missed. But no, I don't have that opportunity, to do that, unfortunately. But and I would probably try to serve the food that my mom's mom would make for us, coming from sort of Ukrainian German heritage, cabbage rolls and the fun things. So probably make that. So it'd be more of a nostalgic dinner.
Love it.
That sounds amazing. How about one last question, very quick, to both of you? You can. What would be the one bit of advice you would tell your 18-year-old self?
Oh, Kelly, you should go first.
Okay. So just recently, I was actually asked to be a guest for a grade 10 high school music class, and they prepared a bunch of questions, like 20 questions. And one of those questions, I think I'm going to tie into this. So the question was something like, what was the biggest obstacle you would say that you've had to overcome in your career? What was the biggest obstacle? And my answer was myself.
Mm.
And I guess if it's my 18-year-old self, I would say, just have some patience, trust yourself, and, keep an open mind and see what happens, and work hard, but not too hard. Have fun, but not too much fun. Okay, that's
Wow, that's great.
Allison, how about you?
I would say, okay, I think I've thought about this because I've talked about this to a couple of my students. I would say number one, for music students maybe who are listening, and if you're in a college program, don't expect to be given anything. Like kind of like in what in light of spirit of what Kelly was saying, like work hard, but don't expect anything. But I think that's a good thing. I think that can be a very liberating thing. Like really just work hard and pursue the things that you really want to do. And I think in line with that, I also want to say, like, don't wait for permission to do things that you feel creatively and artistically are really pulling you or really inspiring you. So follow the music you love and follow it with all of your heart, because that's probably where you should go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Such inspiring words. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, guys.
Thank you so much.
Wow.
Thank you. And thanks so much to everyone tuning in. This was super inspiring. Beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So please, folks, everybody watching, make sure you check out all the links in the message. Allison and Kelly are doing all kinds of interesting things. So please support them and buy their stuff and follow them on YouTube, follow their Facebook pages. I remember sharing is caring. So if you enjoyed this, you can share this. And also just at Music Arts Collective, of course, Amanda and I have a bunch of stuff coming up, including our Sisters in Jazz Day, which apparently we have around 40 participants. So that's really exciting. And also a starting composition webinar coming up in April. So you can check that out.
Cool.
Yeah, Amanda, did you want to say one more thing?
Just thank you again to our
Thank
special
you.
guests. Thanks everyone tuning in.
We love you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Jody. Thank you, Music Arts Collective. Francesca, great to see you, Allison.
Likewise. Thanks, everyone.
Have an awesome day, everybody.
You too.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.